Hi there and welcome to the third video in my debut novel journey series where I'm sharing everything about how I wrote, edited and published my debut novel, The Missing City. The entire playlist is linked right up here and also down there in the description box. Now, in the first two videos, I talked about all the writing mistakes that I made with my first book. And at the end of that, I also mentioned that despite all of those mistakes, Missing City never received a single negative review. Now that exactly was the question where I left you in my previous video. And in this video, I'm going to talk about why this probably happened. Now, the fact that Missing City does not have any negative reviews, I'm not trying to be boastful or trying to say that my book is perfect because it clearly is not. I've talked about all the mistakes in those two videos which you should check out. But I'm trying to imply that despite all of those mistakes, people, the readers, enjoyed this book. They engaged with it and they loved it. And the techniques which, according to me, up-leveled the quality of my first book are exactly what I'm going to list down and explain to you in this video. The first technique is something that I like to call cliffhanger chapter endings. Now, if you're a reader, you're probably aware of cliffhangers already. But let me just quickly pull up a definition from Google just to be clear. A cliffhanger is a type of narrative or a plot device in which the end is curiously abrupt, so that the main characters are left in a difficult situation without offering any resolution or conflicts. Now, this is especially common in books which are supposed to have a sequel or books that are in a series. Not, of course, the final book, but the other books in a series. Cliffhangers are very common in book endings. However, I used the cliffhanger plot device, as Google told you in the definition. I use that plot device for every chapter. The way I write cliffhangers is by simply leaving the reader in an escalated high-tension scene abruptly and then starting a new chapter. Seems simple, doesn't it? But let me take you to the behind the scenes of how I look at it. I, as an engineer cum writer, how I look at it. That's what I'm going to show you. So typically in a novel, chapters, inside a chapter, the scenes are supposed to form this bell-shaped curve, which I like to call the sine wave graph, where you take the reader from a bottom level point where there is no tension, to a high level, escalated high tension point where there are so many questions. The reader's mind is racing, and then you answer those questions slowly and you bring it all down to a neutral position where the readers are feeling satisfied and they are feeling comfortable with the readers. And then you again take your characters up back again in another highly escalated tension scene, and then you again bring them down. So this is how usually scenes work. They are either going up in tension or they are bringing the tension down. So this is how scenes work and this is how chapters work. How I like to look at it though is by using the cosine wave graph instead. Now the cosine wave graph, which I'm going to put on the screen for you, starts with an high tipping escalation point. Basically this means that when the chapter begins, your scene, the first scene of the chapter, is already escalated at a tension point where the characters are already in this tension sequence and your readers are feeling tensed for those people. And then you resolve it back down and you bring the chapter to a resolution point where everything feels fine, and then again you raise the tension back up again. Writing in this sequence, the cosine wave graph, it will leave your chapter with a highly escalated tension point. The final scene of your chapter will be abrupt, will be midway. You will not be entirely finishing that scene in the reader's mind. It will be finished in your mind, but it will not be finished in the reader's mind. You will leave them hanging right up there. Yes, I took my engineering very seriously. In simpler terms, what you really need to do, what you really need to understand is that when it comes to the final scene of your chapter, try to leave the scene midway. Figure out which is the high tension point. High tension point basically means a question where your reader is having a question in their mind and they are looking for a resolution. You as a writer have the resolution with you. You know how you're going to end the scene eventually, but you're not going to end the scene right there in that chapter. You just put a full stop in the middle of that scene and you finish the chapter. And then you probably continue it in the next scene, in the next chapter. That's how I like to do my cliffhanger chapter endings. Will this method work for every novel? Maybe, maybe not. The reason why this method worked best for my novel is because I used it simultaneously with another technique called alternating between perspectives for each chapter. In my book, we follow two protagonists who very early on in their journey get separated to go on to two different locations. And I, as the author, am conveying the story through their perspectives. So we are in two different locations and each chapter alternates between these two locations and these two perspectives. So while doing this and collaborating it with the previous technique, what really happens is when I have a cliffhanger chapter ending, I end one chapter at a cliffhanger, the resolution doesn't immediately come in the next chapter, because the next chapter goes on to the other location, to the other protagonist. So what really happens here is that this other chapter adds a length, and this length which is added onto the story increases the level of suspense. So to explain it in even simpler terms, if chapter 1 is following Sumi, my one protagonist, chapter 2 follows Rahel, my other protagonist, and then chapter 3 again follows Sumi. So according to this theory that I just explained to you, both the techniques, if I leave chapter 1 with a cliffhanger ending with Sumi, and then you will not know what is going to happen to Sumi until chapter 3. So you have that underlying tension throughout chapter 2, even while you are with the other protagonist. Similarly, chapter 2 ends at a cliffhanger where Rahel is in a difficult situation, and then you have to wait for chapter 3 to add that length. You have to read entirety of chapter 3 to reach chapter 4 and find out what happens to Rahel. So this is a cycle. It's a cycle, and these two techniques together, this is how they work. And this is how they add so much of suspense to your book. The third technique I used is using popular tropes from your genre. Now, you must be wondering what a trope is. Or maybe you already know what a trope is, but still, for the sake of simplicity and for people who don't know, let me pull out the simplest definition of tropes that I can find on Google. A trope in literary terms is a plot device or character attribute that is used so commonly in the genre that it's seen as a commonplace or conventional. For example, a trope in superhero stories is a villain who wants to take over the world. Now that you know what tropes are, I would say that using tropes from the genre that you're writing, using popular tropes from the genre that you're writing is a very good technique. It's not a highly recommended technique, and we'll come to that later, but it is a technique that I used in my book. So my book is a young adult fantasy novel, so I looked at the most popular tropes that I used in YA romance, YA fantasy, and then I came up with my two male protagonists. One of them, Alexis, is a suave, sexy, angry young man sort of trope, and the second one is Prince Charming. He's Aaron, of course. You should know if you've read the book that he's Aaron, he's the Prince Charming with a handsome smile, he's gentle, caring, loving, all of that. So those are the two main tropes which I used in my book. And well, are these realistic? No. Are these relatable? Maybe no. But are they satisfying? Yes. 1,000,000 times yes. You can pick up literally any YA fantasy book and you will find at least one of these tropes in those books if it's a very popular one. Anything. You want examples? Well, Edward Cullen from Twilight, Stephen Salvatore from Vampire Diaries, Jace Hirondale from Shadowhunters, Mr. William Darcy from Pride and Prejudice. So now you know the drill. No surprise that my readers loved both my male protagonists, and that worked out brilliantly for the novel. The fourth technique that I used with Missing City is making it unpredictable. Now, this one would sound too boastful, but I really have to say it because all reviewers mentioned it, that the ending of The Missing City is unpredictable. You're not able to guess it. Ask any reader, or actually, you know what, read the book and find out how unguessable the plot is, the story is, and overall, you'll not be able to end the guessing. You will not be able to guess the ending. What did I just say? Anyway, so that's exactly what I did with it. This seems like a vague advice, and it is vague. I admit it is vague. But I'm just gonna give you my little hack, my little trick that I follow to try and make my stories unpredictable. So my simple little hack for this thing is try to think like a reader. That's again vague advice. It again seems like a vague advice even to me while I'm giving it to you. But this is a legit technique and you will be able to realize that once you do it with practice. Try to think like a reader instead of the writer of the story. Once you've written the first draft, or once you're in the process of writing it, you're reaching the ending, and let's say you don't know what the ending is as a writer yourself. So imagine, take a step back and imagine that you are not the writer of the story. You are the reader of the story. Somebody who knows nothing about it and is only going through the page. And then think, if I were the reader of the story, what would be my first guess? Write that down. What would be my second guess or third guess? How would this end? Write that down. And then reverse engineer from that very aspect. Once you know what those readers will be guessing, then you know what you're not supposed to do. And once you know what you're not supposed to do, the options of what you can do, the options of what you are supposed to do becomes more obvious. Now, I can go on and on and on praising my book and it will start sounding boastful. I don't want to do that because I've already put all the best things, best techniques out there. I've given them all to you. So make sure that now you go down to the description box and buy my book, read it, shower your love onto that. Now, you must be wondering this one thing. I've talked everything that I did right in this book. You must be wondering if the book is really that good, if people really enjoyed it, if readers loved it so much, if there is not a single negative review on Amazon or on any other platform. Then why is the book not a bestseller? Why is the book not on top of the charts? Why is it not trending everywhere? What's the problem? Well, yes, I did tell you about the writing mistakes, but still the book is so enjoyable. I told you everything that's working in the book. Then what's the issue? A very legit question. A legit question that I had myself as well until I figured out the answer. If you want the answer too, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because in next week's video, we are talking all about the publishing mistakes I made with my debut novel. Publishing mistakes followed by marketing mistakes. So make sure you hit the subscribe button because that is one video you definitely do not want to miss on this channel. Alright guys, that is me, Srishti Rathore, signing off. See you in the next video. Until then, happy writing! Bye!